Thank you so much for coming out tonight. My name's Andrea Kraus. I'm a water resources specialist at the City of Superior, and my work focuses on the stormwater permit that the city has and stormwater pollution prevention. I'm thinking most of you know, but I'll remind you that the number one pollutant to Lake Superior, to waters nationwide, is stormwater. So it's not that the rain and the snow is falling down full of pollutants, but rather what happens when it hits the ground. So all of our properties, the city property, homes, businesses, anything that's on the ground is going to end up in the St. Louis River estuary and Lake Superior. So it goes down those storm drains, picks up whatever it can carry off the ground. So it could be excess nutrients, fertilizers, leaves, grass clippings. It might be excess sediment, which covers up fish habitat. Could be salt, pet waste. There's quite a number of things that you've probably seen on the roads. Oil leaks in cars. So it really comes down to all these diffuse sources of pollution. And that's what we work on in our department, is educating people about where that pollution comes from and what you can do to help minimize it off your property. It's truly a pollutant that small actions by lots of individuals, the cumulative impact can make a really big difference for Lake Superior. So if you want to know more about our programs at Superior, I've got a lot back there. Storm drain adoption program. We do a community art collaborative in the winter, so coming up, called Orb 365. And we have a rain barrel making workshop that we'll do in the spring, and you're all welcome to be a part of that. If you're from Duluth or another community, I'm happy to connect you with folks from those communities as well. So I love this area. I love the lake. And when I heard about somebody doing a through run on the Superior hiking trail in the matter of a couple weeks, less than a couple weeks, to raise awareness about impacts on Lake Superior and the water resources here, I was very intrigued. Who's spent any time on the Superior hiking trail? Anyone? It's a lovely area. Yeah, so I think we're all connected to it. I've hiked, backpacked. I've never run a section of it. But I looked into this individual and found out that not only is Shawna doing this through hike or through run to raise awareness about keeping the lake clean and what we can do, but she's also deeply connected to this area. Went to Superior High School, teaches at St. Scholastica, works at Animal Allies, has a PhD in sustainability education. She's working actively in our community to keep people engaged around issues of water quality and sustainability. And I reached out to her, and within a matter of a day, perhaps, I heard back, and she said, yes, I'd be happy to present. She actually contacted me in the middle of this through run she was doing, which was also very impressive, and I appreciated. So I feel very lucky to be in a place like this, to be in a community with you all, and I'm very excited to introduce you to someone, if you haven't met her already, who is a great member of our community and doing really good things. Speaking tonight about building collaboration through adventure, this is Dr. Shawna Weaver.
Hi. So thank you so much for being here. It really means a lot to me. I really love talking about the region, the water, the land here, and I love talking about adventures, and I think that's a big reason why a lot of us live here, is that we have this amazing outdoor space and place to enjoy. And so I really I want this to be an open conversation. If you have questions, feel free to ask. I have some things that I will try to remember to say, but in general, I just would love to hear from all of you and have conversations about what brings you here and why you're so excited about this topic. I really love it. I love talking about the adventure that I went on. So thanks for being here and sharing this space with me. And thank you so much to Andrea and the City of Superior and a couple other sponsors. That Great Lakes Commons and the Pollination Project helped me get the ball rolling on this project. So thanks to them also. So I grew up in Superior, and I left for a couple of years and came back as soon as I had a work opportunity to live here because I really love this place. I think that the lake is the heart of our continent, and we can see that just by looking at a map. And there's something really magical about being here and about being around the lake. And so I've spent a lot of time on the Superior hiking trail. I grew up outside quite a bit and had sort of I wouldn't say a lifelong goal of doing the whole trail, but I've always been interested in people who do things like that and wondering how they decide to take on such an adventure like that. So I decided to do this last summer. It was around 300 miles, and I made a goal to finish it in 9 days. And the reason why was because I love a challenge, and because the Superior Hiking Trail, I think, is such an amazing resource that we have here. It's free. You can camp there for free. You can walk all the way from Wisconsin to Canada, and do that entirely unsupported if you want to. And that's something that is so unique about us and very few other places in this country. So I wanted to celebrate that a little bit. And like Andrea said, I recently finished my PhD in sustainability education. I love being an educator, and I think that the best way for me to teach about something is to know it intimately myself. But there are some other reasons that are a little bit deeper, I think, probably. So I'll show this really quick for those of you who maybe walked into the wrong room and aren't really sure what's going on right now. Just do this quick little video. Oh, I gave it too many tasks.
10 years ago, I was recovering from 2 spinal surgeries that could have easily ended my desire to run. Today, I am preparing to run the entire Superior Hiking Trail in a record 10 days. Throughout these long years of recovery, I've learned how resilient the human body can be when properly cared for. The same can be said about Lake Superior and our community. Lake Superior contains 10% of our entire planet's drinkable water. Protecting the lake is especially...
Oh, you cut out in the best piece of information. That's all right. So the more sobering reason, I guess, that I felt really motivated to do something like this was because I am really worried about the health of the lake. We are sitting in the headwaters of the entire Great Lakes system. Everything that we put into Lake Superior goes through the rest of the Great Lakes and into the ocean. And we have 10% of the whole entire world's drinkable water, and the Great Lakes altogether contains 20%. And that's a huge percentage of something that is important for all of us to continue living and thriving here. So I wanted to gather as much information as I could, which is partly why I did the project the way I did, and that was to do interviews along the way with local experts who were working on social issues, environmental issues, and who knew the economy of our area really well and could explain to me what our history is and what the issues are and what their hopes for the future are and what they see to be the reasons why we can survive and thrive here. The other reason is students, and so I have a few here tonight who already had to listen to me today, so I appreciate their coming. And they were a big reason behind this because The first time that this really came up in my mind as an idea was when I was at an event for the Friends of Boundary Waters. And they were talking about people who had done these adventurous things, and they were doing so to raise awareness. And they just had such cool stories about what they experienced. And so somebody asked me that night, if you did something like that, what would you do? And I said, I think I'd probably run the Superior Hiking Trail because that would be really fun. And then the next day, I had to introduce to my students their semester-long project, which is after you're spending a semester learning about the Twin Ports area, the social and environmental justice issues, learning who the organizations are here and what they're doing, what they're working on, they then have to spend a semester doing their own project. And so that's your assignment in a few weeks, just so you know. And they presented to me their question, well, if you were given this assignment, what would you do? And so thus began the journey. This is the map of the Superior Hiking Trail. It starts up on the Canadian border, basically, and now is completed all the way through until the Wisconsin border. So we started in the north, and I accomplished the majority of it except for this area has a detour because there's a land easement issue. And when I was running through this area between Castle Danger and Two Harbors, it was storming and raining too much. The SHTA said you really shouldn't be running. It's not good for the trail or for your body. And I learned that they were right about that both ways. So I missed that little section that particular day. And then this also happened right after the big storm that blew down most of those trees that were in that video in Hartley Park. And so we couldn't run through Hartley at that point. But the rest of it, for the most part, I remember most of it happening. And so I started, August 22nd or so. And I started with Renee, who's here, who was my awesome co-captain for the first 100 miles. And that was super appreciated. For one thing, she was willing to come with, which was a rarity. And also she's a fellow experiential educator. And so her and her husband run Encompass Learning in the Duluth area. So this set of values was near and dear to her as well. And she has her wilderness first responder, all of the things you need to know for any possible thing that could happen, which was a big deal on the SHT, especially in the northern part where it's so remote. There's no cell service, and some days we didn't see anybody really unless we were in the state park areas. So we started off a lot more cheerful in that picture than in some of the other moments to come. And I'll talk through the first day a little bit. And then from there, I'll just discuss, some of the highlights and be open to questions about certain spots on the trail or things that happened. But so the first day gives you kind of a good snapshot of how the process went. We couldn't find the trail. It was this gloomy, hazy, foggy, rainy morning, and we thought we found the trail, and there were these giant tracks right in the entryway, and we were like, is that a cougar or a timber wolf? I was later told it. Someone thinks it's a timber wolf. But either way, we weren't interested in meeting the owner of them. So we had to run the road until we could get to the next place where we could get in. But once we got in, I think my favorite part of the trail is the section north of Grand Marais, close to Canada. You see some phenomenal views. This one in particular is of Grand Marais, but there are some great views there of all the way to Isle Royale. And what I loved about that part of the trail is you have a lot of peaks and ridge lines, and then you drop really quickly all the way down to beaver ponds and small inland lakes. And so you get to see such a range of things. And this was another runner that joined me for like 5 or 6 miles that night through Grand Marais. This is Andy Butter, who ran around the entire lake on the roads this summer. And it took them 2 or 3 months to do it. So he had just finished a couple days before this and then joined me, and we had this shared limping experience through 6 miles around Grand Marais. But one of the magical moments that happened the first day was this beaver that you can't really see in my high-tech iPhone photo. But we came down off a ridge, and this beaver was sitting in the water probably 2 or 3 feet away from us and staring at us as intently as we were staring at her. And then she finally decided we were cool enough to see what she's got going on, and grabbed her branch and slowly swam away. And it was a highlight of the day, and it felt like things like that would always happen throughout the day, right when we really needed something exciting to happen, or something that would lift your spirits or help you forget about the pain you're in, which got increasingly intense as the 9 days went. But some other highlights and lowlights I'll talk about. Other favorite sections of the trail and other pieces of trail magic that happened, and then some of my favorite people that ended up joining or that were crew members. And I think all around, my favorite part of this experience was the community that it built. So this is one of my favorite parts. This is one of the many kind of beaver pond areas that you see, especially in the northern half. And it's morning of day 2. And so this would have been like just barely north of Grand Marais. One of the best spots in the trail. And then later in the day, this is late August, and this was a hot day. And so we appreciated in the morning the fog, but it would quickly lift, and just, it kind of looks nice now. I miss the warm weather, but we'd spent a lot of time checking and rechecking the map and knowing where we were. We found really early on that if you aren't keeping track of exactly where you are, it's not that you will get lost on the trail. It's a fantastically maintained trail, but you will get a little bit disoriented, and all of a sudden 1 mile feels like it might have been 5, or maybe it wasn't any at all, and you kind of get lost in your head in the distance. And so Renee kept her head enough to keep us in check and figure out where we were all the time. And by day 3, I was sort of like, I don't know, just like push me along. So some of the other great spots. This is Lily Pond in the top left, and that's right around mile 150, so pretty much right in the middle of the Superior Hiking Trail. And the best parts, I think, were the boardwalks that take you through these inland lakes and swamps. And I think the Superior Hiking Trail is known for the great vistas, and there are great ones. And for being on the lake, although there's only one part here in Grand Marais or near Grand Marais that you're actually on the lake, besides in the city of Duluth. And the vistas are wonderful, but I really appreciated getting intimate with the trail in those parts where you're noticing what's immediately around you instead of what's out there looking over the lake. So that was, I think, something that surprised me, that I appreciated more than I thought I would. And then as you get toward the Duluth section, these are some of my favorite spots near here that you can easily get to within the half an hour. We have Miller Creek, and then the trail goes right through the Inger Tower Park, and is a really beautiful spot. And then I believe that river, I think, is above Jay Cook, but I might be wrong. I won't spend much time on these photos. So this takes us into some of the challenges. The challenges were definitely, surprisingly, the blisters that happened. So I assumed that my body would break down in different ways, and it really didn't, and I was pleasantly surprised about that. But your skin is like the first thing to go. It's like the canary in the coal mine, I guess. But that felt awful for probably 6 of the 9 days, which was really unfortunate. So that was the biggest challenge that I had. But I feel very lucky that I was able to do the whole thing without having serious injuries or other problems. But the people were the highlight that helped me through a lot of those challenges. So this top left, that's Paul. He crewed for me for 5 days. And I don't think I could have done it without him being there, at least not in the way that it went. It was super helpful to have him and Renee and a couple others be my crew. And then a coworker, Lucas, was there for mile 200, which was the hardest day for me, because it was over halfway, and it was after the day that I had done more than 40 miles by myself, which I thought would be the most difficult day, that I was by myself in the most isolated area up by Crosby Manitou State Park, and I saw very few people. I don't think I saw anybody for about 15 miles. And but the next day was actually a lot harder for me. And so that was interesting to kind of feel through, like, what's going to be difficult emotionally and mentally and physically. And so I tried to remain open to that and accepting of it, because it definitely was not what I expected. This group of women is a group of 50-plus women who hike a different section every year, and they make it their friend reunion. And so we happened to run into them sometime during day 2, and they were just such a phenomenal group. And that was one of the most fun parts of this, was you don't see many people on the trail, but when you do see them, you know they're going to be excited to share their story, to compare the weather that we just went through and what's hurting and where they're going. And that was my favorite part about it. This couple knew that I was on the trail, and so they had been waiting to see me all day and anticipated catching me. And there were a few people that said that. And that was totally helpful in moments like that's that trail magic, that you just feel like totally alone out here. I might not get to the next campsite. Like, I feel like I could just sit here for hours and disintegrate. And then all of a sudden someone pops through the woods and has something cheerful to say. And I think that's my favorite part about the SHT community. So the other big piece that I worked on throughout this was those interviews with different experts. And so Lorena Rios Mendoza, in the top left corner, she's a chemist and she works at UWS, and she's been studying plastics in Lake Superior for a few years now. And it was her research that pushed the federal ban that Obama passed against microbeads in cosmetics and soaps. And so her work, coming from right here in Superior, has had a national impact on our country and on our environment. And so it's just been an honor to meet people like her. And the day before I left for the run, I was part of a project called Expedition, Expedition, which was all women all across the Great Lakes doing this plastics research from every single port in the entire Great Lakes region. We all left at the same time in one day, did the same research, and now have all of that research compiled. And Lorena was one of the people who was in charge of that. So that was a really great thing, to be out in the water thinking about why this stuff is so important to me, and getting to see firsthand what's actually in the water and what's going on there, and then taking that motivation with me the next morning to do this project. And then in the middle is Dr. John Pastor, who works at UMD, and he's a biologist, and he's been working on climate change and the forest, and how we're going to see the trees specifically changing and the animals changing over the next 50 years as the climate change happens in the Lake Superior region faster and more intensely than it is happening anywhere else in the country. So I spent an afternoon with him in the middle of day 8 at Bagley Nature Center, with him pointing out to us the most amazing trees that he's telling us will be gone in 10 or 20 years, and what will be replacing that, and what the region will look like as we go through that phase. So that was really inspiring and motivating and disheartening at the same time. Yeah.
So, did you just say that climate change or the effects of it will be happening here more intensely than
Right.
elsewhere? And I was thinking, so why is that? Because we're at the edge of the boreal forest,
Right.
and it will be withdrawn, or why?
Yeah, so there are probably a few reasons coming together for why it's happening, but we know that Lake Superior is warming faster than other bodies of water. And Lake Superior, we know living here, it has its own microclimate around it. And so when it doesn't freeze over as much as it normally does, or it doesn't get as cold in the water during the winter as much as it should, then we see the impacts outside of the water too, with the way the seasons change and how quickly. And so then we see a big influx in bacteria that should die out during the winter, and other pests that are killing off trees. And we also see that in the invasive species in the water that could be being killed off if the water was getting cold enough each winter. And now that it's not, we see things like zebra mussels having a much greater impact than they maybe would have had the infestation happened 40 years ago. So that's been a really interesting thing for me to learn about and to try to piece together through all of these different perspectives. So I also have the economic perspective that I've been thinking about through this. So Paula Pulaski in the bottom, she is the founder of Minbox, which focuses on locally made products that are made without any sort of single-use plastic or other garbage. And so all of these people, this is a short list of some of the people I've been speaking with about all these issues and trying to make it as holistic as possible so that I understand scientifically, economically, socially, what's happening, how they are all interacting, how they're enmeshed, and what people are doing about it to move forward. And these people, what I find is so amazing about them is they're so engaged and invested in their work, and yet their names we don't hear about. So many of these people I had not heard of until I started talking to people and saying, I want to do this. Who should I talk to in your community? Who should I know? And then all of a sudden, so many names are coming out of the woodwork that I had no idea they were doing projects. And then I hear someone like Lorena is having a national impact. And so that's something that I think is so amazing about the Headwaters region, that so many people here are so hardworking and doing such amazing things, and so modest about it. That's a big part of our culture that is beautiful, but then also a little bit unfortunate because we're our own best kept secret. So 4 themes came out of all of these interviews, and I have found it so interesting that there's so many people I've spoken with, from there's so many different perspectives, really all come down to the same 4 lessons that they have for me. And everyone said the best thing that we can do as a culture is to slow down and appreciate the moment, appreciate what's going on directly in front of us, that we are so attached to technology, which is so great in many ways, but that we miss out on what's going on here and now, and we miss out on creating a community right in front of us and enjoying the day and life and the nature that we have. And that was one thing I kept thinking about is, so I'm running as fast as I can, like I'm trying to move through this space as quickly as I can, but at the same time, this is so much slower than I've ever given myself the opportunity to take in this land. And so if I could do it over again, I think I'd spend a summer really embracing this lesson to slow down. The other thing that I'll talk about is being a part of a positive feedback loop, that we're not doing service and we're not giving back just because we're obligated to, because we're entitled, we're privileged, and we need to give that back to the community. We actually should be anticipating that we're getting something for that our contribution is coming back to us, and that's something we miss often as more privileged people who just see it as a responsibility instead of actually something that is good for us too. And they all talked about how much crap we have and that we don't need it, and that we can live and thrive on so much less if we really think about what helps us to be happy and content with life, and how much we can cut out of what we carry around with us. And I felt that was definitely true in the 9 days. There were things I missed, like a bed. But there was a lot that I didn't miss that in normal life I feel like I need from any given morning to the afternoon. So that was a really good exercise for me that I still am working on this one a lot. And then the fourth thing that my students know is really important to me is not to be a bystander. They all said the only way that you're going to change anything is by speaking your truth, living your truth, being an example, being the change that you want to be, presenting yourself to whatever issue is important to you, and embracing what you can do about it. And they all said they got to where they are really by letting that passion lead their vocation instead of picking a job to get the money and to go home and to enjoy the crap. Like, they're really, I think that's the thing that maybe ties together all four of the themes. So what's coming out of this? These lessons that I learned and these people I've spoken with. So it's going to live in an organization called the Great Lakes Headwaters Collective. So St. Louis River technically is the headwater for the lake, but the entire watershed of Lake Superior is critically important. And we have a cultural region from basically the border of Wisconsin and Michigan to the Twin Ports, and then through up to the border with Canada. And that region where these people are living and working feels like we have a lot in common culturally. We have a lot in common as far as what our values are. And yet we don't know each other very well. And so I've been working on this since the run happened. And my great colleague Emily Levang has joined me in this process. And so we're working on what will be a website that is accessible to everyone, that you can choose based on theme, based on location, what you're really interested in learning about and who you want to know about and how to get a hold of them. And then there will also be a short film within that website for people to understand a summary of how this all was born and what this all is about. The original thought was to have a longer film, and that started to feel like then that's not accessible to the community. And that only gives a snapshot of some of these things. And the more that I've lived and breathed this stuff, the more I realize how complicated this all is, and a film can't do it justice. So this will be an ongoing, ever-building process that hopefully the whole community contributes to. So this just kind of shows our headwaters area that I was talking about through Grand Marais and through Ashland. And the hope is to connect all of us so that we know what's going on and we know how to help and we know where we're needed. So the mission for this is to foster environmental, social, and economic stewardship around sustainability. So sustainability is, I think, it may be a confusing word, and it's something that has a lot of maybe sometimes even negative connotations around it, but it really is about all three pegs that are needed for people to survive and thrive in a community. So it's not just about environmental sustainability, it's about the social causes, and it's about our economic needs as well. And we hope to do that through this resource sharing, the community building that will happen out of that sharing, and the education that we can do with it once it's all together. And the vision is that this Headwaters region will be a thriving example of what you can do when you come together as a community to help foster community and environmental well-being. And our three objectives are to identify the efforts that are going on, and that was the really fun part of this project for me, was to hear who's doing what and get to talk to them. I was starstruck all summer long getting to have these meetings with these people who are just phenomenal and really standing up for what needs to happen in this area. And then to connect community members to each other. And that's been another favorite part for me, is helping people network who want to be doing a project that is maybe already happening or has a skill that's needed in some other area or in some other arena that they hadn't thought about before. And then I think most importantly, and what really summarizes it for Emily and I and probably all of us, is that we want to have something to give to future generations. So we want to entrust future generations with a sustainable headwaters region, an ecosystem that they can be proud of and that they can continue to help thrive. So that's all I have to say, I think. But I'd love to hear questions or comments or thoughts. Yeah.
I've been wondering about the clarity of the Lake Superior. I know when you say in wintertime there's more ice, it settles down and clears more, but overall, are there being more pollutants in there that are keeping the depth of the light coming through? Do you know anything how that's going?
It's a good question. I know that about 5 to 10 years ago, before much research was done on pollutants in the lake, people assumed we didn't have any because Lake Superior is so relatively clean compared to any other place. And then when Lorena started doing her research, she realized that, oh, that's absolutely not true. And so we do have a lot of plastics in the lake. And the problem with plastic pollution in particular is that it doesn't ever break down and go away. It breaks down into smaller pieces that become more and more difficult actually to clear out of the lake. And then what happens is the smaller they get, then they get eaten by smaller and smaller organisms. And the most important organisms in our world are the tiniest ones that we can't see. So they're eating plastic and they're dying from it. And so I would imagine that plastics have something to do with how it has changed visually. But I'm not sure. Any other questions or comments for me? Zach?
Shawna, you talked about those like magic moments, like when you're coming down the trail and seeing a beaver, or do you have other one or two maybe
Yeah.
other moments along the way that just brighten your day?
The end of the second or third day that Renee and I were running together, we were like a little bit delirious and singing our way through the last mile, and apparently people could hear us coming from a long way away. And and moments like that, moments with everyone who joined me, where you're just caught up in the relationship and in the conversation, were so phenomenal to me. I had a moment similar to that with Mary Bew, who's a musician in town, and she ran with me day 8, and we were running through Duluth, and we got to Lake Avenue Cafe, and we were like, we could keep running or we could take a little break. And so we went into Lake Avenue Cafe and had a drink and got back on the trail. And those moments where I found myself forgetting about the greater project just felt so good. Like they felt like this is the vacation, this is the adventure that I really wanted this to be. Other magical moments were every time I saw a frog, because we don't see them very much anymore. And so that was really awesome to see all over the SHT, just tons of little toads and a bright green frog that I didn't think we had in Minnesota. That was super cool to see. Every day had its set of amazing moments. Yeah. Kathy?
I'm just thinking about those isolated areas, and I know an adult male hunts, he's definitely afraid of wolves. Now, and usually they're not afraid of you, they're getting very bold. So did you get some kind of slobber?
No. I never, the only time we felt wary was right at the beginning when we saw the prints. And otherwise, I feel like when you're in a relatively healthy area, especially with wolves, when they're in an intact pack, they don't have any interest in people. It's the wolves that have broken off because the alpha wolf has been hunted and the rest of the pack they lose their pack, and that's when they become dangerous for people. so in that area, I actually feel safer when it comes to stuff like wildlife, because they're doing their thing, and I'm just a visitor there, and they're not stressed. So I never felt unsafe. Did you, Renee?
No. I had this awesome experience of getting to be with you for the first couple of days, and I'm curious if you could share like one or two like big aha moments, because I got to kind of experience you interviewing some people and then leaving, and it was I did a lot of running behind Shawna, but processing afterwards, kind of some of the conversations you had with some people was I think really unique, and one of those pieces that it's hard to capture and share. But would you share just like one or two things that were like these maybe like takeaways for
Yeah,
you
sure.
after having some of those conversations?
Yeah. So one thing that stood out was Grand Marais is a really phenomenal community, and they've had a special challenge of being a community in a county that doesn't have mines, and so they don't have the primary economic source that we think of on the North Shore to help sustain their community. And they have built themselves actually on liberal arts. They're an arts colony and arts community, and music, subsistence living through the folk house and through the arts colony, brewing. They found really creative ways to eat healthfully in a place that doesn't grow much, and to have a really strong community that's really based on a culture that we maybe don't see thriving in communities anymore. And so it was really phenomenal for me to hear from 4 individuals in particular who are in Grand Marais, and one is a scientist, but the way she approaches science and teaching about science is through creative nonfiction, and then the others were involved in the art and creation projects there. So I think that's one thing that stood out to me, that there is room for us to be more creative than we are when we think about how to thrive as a community. And we can watch Grand Marais for some of those lessons. And I think the same is happening on the South Shore. When we think about Bayfield and Ashland and in Superior, what we're trying to do here, we get it, it's happening, and it can happen in more communities, and we can have trust in that, because Grand Marais has been doing it for about 60 years, and they're doing it well. So, thanks.
While mentioning Grand Marais, it's obviously also a very popular destination for travelers and tourism and so on. And how do you see that fitting in with the sustainability goals? Because, I mean, I appreciate the artist community, but what really is driving that economy, in a serious way, is tourism dollars.
Right. Yeah, and that's interesting too, because they talked about that up there, that there's not for any of them, but they could feel it in the community, that there's sort of a love-hate relationship with tourism. And like John Pastor was saying, we can't just put all our eggs in the tourism basket, because in 50 years we're not going to be the North Woods anymore, and tourism is no longer going to be something for us to thrive on either. And so that is a complicated thing that I think Grand Marais is facing, that how much is sustainable, how much is too much. But what they seem to be finding, at least among the people who've been really thinking about the issues, is that it is working well for them, and that it's important to remain positive about it. I think I feel that in Duluth too. I live in Duluth now, and every summer, you sort of feel like you lose a little bit of your home. But at the same time, I love thinking about how this place is so awesome that people come here from everywhere. And so I tend to have a really positive outlook about tourism, but I know that's not the universal thought about it. Any other comments. I'd love to stay around after and keep talking.
I just comment on this gentleman's question earlier, and you talked about mining, and right, so like Grand Marais, for example, is in Cook County. Cook County is 93% of that's national state forest,
Yeah.
so it can't be developed. And you're talking about economic development up there, and so something that county has done is place specific taxes on the tourism, right? So we go up there, we spend money, but 3% is extra in that county that goes towards funding county projects
Yeah.
based on our tourism dollars that are spent up there. So understanding some of that, I think, is interesting when you're bringing up mining, sustainability, tourism, all of that.
Yeah, that's a good point. Can I introduce you? Zach Burns is part of the Lutzen economy, and so he knows the economic issues up there very well, especially through Lutzen Resort. And Lutzen has done some incredible things in trying to figure out how to balance environmental sustainability and social and economic sustainability. And so I think Lutzen is one of those places too that we can really take a lot of good lessons from, that they've had to fight that fight of like, how do you do a business up there with a lot of tourists and use a lot of land and do it in a way that that land is preserved as best it can be. And I think Lutzen does it well. And so if you have specific questions about economy in the North Shore, Zach would be a good one to grab at the end. So. Any other thoughts for me for the group?
I'm just wondering about the logistics of your running. Were you carrying gear on you, or you have a crew? Were they like food and sleeping things?
I had a small pack that I bought after the first day when the small pack I had was dreadfully a terrible fit for the project. So so I went and dropped $100 in Grand Marais to get a really good, very small running pack. I had a crew every day, so I some of the days I did the whole day on my own and brought food, but the first few days especially, pretty much every time we hit a road, we had crew waiting for us. Which was kind of a fun way to do it. And then it was fun later on to see how much of the day I could do without crew. So as I went on, I think I got more confident in knowing what I would need and when. But logistically, a lot goes into figuring that out. I spent all summer trying to figure it out, and then I thought I knew, and then I totally didn't know. So.
I'm sure that you need to recommend when you decide to run 300 miles. You must be a runner.
I started running about 5 years ago, and that was a coworker of mine signed me up for the Grandma's Half Marathon. And I said, I am not a runner. I've had these surgeries. I don't run. I'm not interested in running. It hurts. I don't want to do it. And she was like, well, just see if you get in the lottery. Like, just see if your name gets picked for Grandma's. Like, okay, fine. And then it was. And she was like, oh, yeah, well, I know yeah, I knew you were going to get in because I just told them to pick your name. It's like, you jerk. So I sort of got conned into it. But I'm really glad for that. I think it's amazing what the human body can do when you let yourself be pushed. And when you set a goal that is higher than maybe you anticipate ever doing, we can do a lot more than we think we can. So that's been my running lesson. I still don't love it. I still don't consider myself a runner all the time. Like, I appreciate it, but it's still a challenge for me for sure. Any other questions?
How many calories do you think you needed each day to keep you going?
Oh my God, way more than I ate. It was interesting to be so exhausted and not be able to sleep and be so empty of everything, and you know that, and yet you don't want to eat. And so I would force myself to eat enough to kind of keep going. But I don't know how many pounds I lost, but there were a couple weeks that I was in total refeeding mode. And then I surpassed it with fervor this last month of just like enjoying food again, because during the run, nothing tasted good, and laying down didn't feel good, and standing didn't feel good, and drinking didn't, nothing felt good for 3 days. But yeah, they say about 100 calories a mile. I have no idea. It's a lot. I felt it.
So what inspires you to keep going? What inspired you? You talked a little bit about it earlier,
Yeah.
but coming from a couple of spinal surgeries, which had to have been, there's a story right there, and then to continue to be inspired to overcome some of those obstacles initially, and then keep going doing this.
I think it goes back to those themes that I kept hearing from the people I've been interviewing, that you're only going to get as much out of whatever you do as you put into it. And so it just has felt really good to be as much a part of a community as I can be. It's felt really good to challenge myself as much as I can to develop the confidence in myself. And then I really think a big motivation for me is being an educator, that education is so important, and educating women and girls is so important. And I was lucky enough to be born to an educator who instilled that value in me, and to become one myself, and I just think that's where the world will change. So that's always kind of the forefront of everything that I've been doing lately is how can I share confidence building and skill building and community development with the next generation. So, thank you all so much for coming, and I'll be around after.